Ladies and gentlemen, this video is being recorded July of 2024, and earlier this week, some very tragic news struck the chess world. Grandmaster Ziaur Rahman, or Ziaur Rahman, I will call him Zia, passed away tragically at the age of 50 years old. He actually shared a birthday with my grandfather, which was May 1st. He had turned 50 earlier this year, and he passed away in the middle of a chess game. He was actually playing the Bangladesh Chess Championship, something that he was a multiple time over, winning that event 10 times. And he was an incredible player. He was the second ever person from Bangladesh to earn the Grandmaster title. He was a trainer of many young talents, and just clearly an amazing man. And in this video, I will dedicate some time to talking about some of his best games, including a game against Magnus Carlsen. He actually played Magnus Carlsen at the Olympiad while representing his country of Bangladesh. Now, when this happened, there was an outpouring of love on social media, particularly from the Indian chess fans. First, it all started on ChessBase India, and it continued with very strong players like Surya Ganguly, as well as Srinath Narayanan. So clearly, Zia had a very, very heavy influence and significant influence in the lives of many, many individuals. Also, the CEO of FIDE tweeted Emil Sutovsky about him. And one very special thing about Zia is that actually his son, I believe 19 years old, and he played on an Olympic team together, which has never happened before. At least not father-son, as far as I know. I think Pia and Anna Kramling have represented on the women's Swedish team, but this was very special. Now, I'd like to dedicate some time to show you one of his best games, and also show you his game against Magnus, and actually show you, it's obviously a terrible, terrible thing what has happened, but he was in the middle of a chess game when I believe he suffered a stroke. I think at first some reports said heart attack, stroke. And he actually had a winning position. So it's almost fitting that such a legend and a pioneer of the game, he would be fighting for a win until the very end, and he would have a dominating position. He was playing against Enamul Hussain, also Grandmaster from Bangladesh. And this was, like I said, part of the National Chess Championship. He was a multiple-time champion. He was known for his positional and solid style. This game was a King's Indian defense, which is obviously one of the most combative ways to play with the black pieces. And Zia set up in a fianchetto style like this. C5, castles, knight c6. This position has been studied a lot. And basically, the idea is to cover the c4 pawn. Rook b1 was played, black played rook e8, and now he played this very interesting move b4, opening up the queen side. Right, so we have pawn takes, rook takes, and he basically locked away his opponent's knight on the edge of the board. The rook is ready to pressure this way, it's ready to put pressure on the knight, it's also potentially ready to go over there. Black played bishop f5, Zia played bishop to b2, queen a1. Look at this idea, I mean, this is incredible stuff. Utilizing the fact that the rook is off of the home square, you start fighting on the diagonal. Queen a1 is the top move of the computer. It is such an obscure move, but the young man, I should say, from Bangladesh did find it. Bishop d3 allowed this in. Knight b3. Bishop went back to a6, and the position was dominant. Rook e7, rook to a4, putting pressure on the queen side. The knight reroutes to the b4 square, and it looks like white is crashing through. But unfortunately, in this position, the game was cut short, and so was Ziaur Rahman's life. And it's obviously it's a big tragedy. But I think it goes to show his influence on the game, particularly like was said with the young players of India. And we've lived now through several years of the chess boom from about 2020. We haven't really had a case like this. We haven't had a person's life end way too soon who had a significant influence on the game. So I'm going to try to bring these stories to you as much as I can. And I actually have, I said Zia was the second ever Grandmaster from Bangladesh. Actually, my first ever win in a classical time control was against the first ever Grandmaster from Bangladesh, Niaz Murshid. So I've actually played Grandmaster Niaz Murshid several times, and I find it fascinating that you can be one of the first two Grandmasters from a part of the world and inspire others. Now, on a bright note, I would like to show you two games that Zia played. This one was played more recently, but the game against Magnus Carlsen was a great one because he actually played one of my favorite openings. I love the Trumpowski, and he played it here against none other than Magnus. This was in the 2008 Olympiad, the chess Olympiad, like the ultimate pinnacle of the sport, and it was played in Dresden in Germany. So Magnus was rated 2786, which is not a rating we're used to seeing with Magnus, but in 2008, he wasn't yet the #1 rated player in the world. Magnus played e6 to meet the Trumpowski, and Zia played e4 with the idea to pin the knight to the queen. Now, the thing is, that doesn't actually do too much because you can always play h6. So if I take your knight, there is this move. h6 was chosen by Magnus right away, and this is actually, this has a very, very unique name. This has a name that you cannot really easily predict just by looking at the position. It's called the big center variation of the Trumpowski. So d5, knight to d2, c5, knight f3, knight c6, and basically, Black tries to right away say, look, I just can't let you have this big center, right? Like, if you do, you're going to be able to push forward and put pressure on my position. Now, I think the way to play for an advantage here with White is you need to pin the knight to the king. But the truth is, since you gave away a bishop for a knight so easily, Black really doesn't have any difficulties equalizing, and he should be fine. But bishop b5, I think, is the way to play for an advantage. Instead, Zia plays dc, which is a completely reasonable move, and bishop to d3 and both sides castle. Now, the engine here prefers Black ever so slightly because it puts a lot of emphasis on having the bishop pair. It thinks that having the two bishops will lead to an advantage in the long run, but it's actually very challenging to get this bishop out. You cannot play e5. You also can't really play, like, let's say, rook d8, and then here, because I take, and before you can get your bishop out, you lose the game to a fork. So queen h7 and queen h8. Keep an eye on queen h7 because it actually will maybe come up later in the game. So we have castles, the bishop goes back to b6, and queen e2. And again, Black is very, very slightly better. The engine here wants Black to play g5, which is a very, very big decision. Obviously, g4, trying to ruffle some feathers. If White plays this, then you can even continue with the h-pawn, and you are able to get away with weakening your own king like this because White's kind of cramped. White can't really move anything forward. So, you know, if White wastes a little bit of time, suddenly here comes g3, and White is basically losing the game because of the bishop, right? Now, Magnus doesn't play g5. He plays queen f4, which is a reasonable move. He's trying to just basically put some pressure. Maybe he was trying to get Zia to play g3 so he could go over there. Now White has a weakness, but White just played rook d1, so he basically just improves his position a little bit, brings his pieces to the center. Black plays bishop d7. We have now bishop c2. Bishop c2 is setting up a very sneaky threat of take, and queen d3, which threatens the pawn and threatens checkmate, at which point White would simply be winning a pawn. So bishop c2 is very sneaky, and Magnus plays rook d8. The idea of rook d8 is to make sure the king can always escape, and also to kind of phantom defend this pawn because the bishop would be moving. Now, what's interesting is that he actually allows Ziaur Rahman to play like this, and queen h7 is on the way. Now, you can play g6 here, give up the pawn, then there's bishop f5 hitting the bishop, then there's queen b3, knight a5, trying to pry the queen away from the defense of the bishop, but after queen to a4, somehow everything is holding together. So Magnus thinks for a second here and plays bishop e6 and completely allows queen h7 check. This is crazy. Now here, White can already go queen h8 and win this pawn, but it would be a very bad decision because rook g8 would likely lead to the devastation of your position. You're not quite losing your queen, but I think you're going to lose your king. You can give a check, it doesn't even matter. The king could actually go to f6, which is pretty gangster. Just walk all the way out, but because everything is protected around the king is totally safe on the f6 square. So knight b3 was chosen instead, which is probably the best move. Even rook e1 is very nice, just bringing a rook to the center of the board, and Ziaur Rahman's just much better against 2786 rated Magnus Carlsen, who at the time was 18 years old. So, you know, when you're 18, you're not good at much. But, you know, he was already obviously very, very good at chess. This was a very clear, calculated risk. But instead, white plays knight b3, trying to disallow this pawn any forward movement, and rook e1 is coming next. So, queen f6 back, protecting his king a little bit. And, you know, you can play rook e1, you can put the knight on d4, which is exactly what he does, and black just has a slightly worse position. White's position is fantastic. White is blocking the pawn, white is pressuring the bishop, white is going to put this and pressure the bishop. If Magnus tries to keep pieces on the board, he's going to end up in a losing position. I mean, white is going to play rook e1 and just have massive amounts of pressure. And this king, the second it crosses into the center, is going to get hit with these rooks. These bishops have been rendered useless by the blockade. So knight bd4, and, you know, Ziaur Rahman had an excellent position against Magnus Carlsen. Takes, rook c8. And look at this move. Rook d3 followed by rook f3 is on the way. A knuckle sandwich is headed for Magnus's face. Amazing. So Magnus actually has to take the knight, and here he has nothing. He's got absolutely nothing. He's got probably the worst bishop, and he's got the pressure on the pawn here. So he's the one that has to begin bailing out. He's got to start trading the pieces, holding the game. Queen h8 still does nothing because the king just goes here. You got to go right back. So rook c4, white reinforces. Magnus trades and threatens back rank checkmate. Well, Ziaur just brings the rook back to d1, and that's it. I mean, he just has a completely solid position, and Magnus has the worst bishop. Now, Magnus can still try to continue this game with, like, king e7, but if this queen gets back, all right, and let's say even queen d4, this is forever white's game to win. Forever, because this pawn is weak, and it's on the same color square as this. You won't rush with the queen trade. You probably play, like, you know, h3, maybe f3, slowly start bringing the king, improving the positioning of the king. Put your pawns in a way that they repel this bishop. Put your bishop in a way that it targets the... So you're just going to play the game. So instead of that, Magnus goes d4. And we have a big simplification, h3. Actually here, Ziaur was just straight up winning. I'm not actually sure what Magnus had overlooked. Queen a5 was a absurd move. I guess the idea was rook a1, rook e8. But king f1... King f1 stops everything rook e1, and b3 is a threat, and the bishop is just trapped. So Ziaur Rahman was actually, for half a move, totally winning against Magnus. With this move, queen a5, I think he was relying on tricks, but, I mean, this move is a killer. It is an absolute killer. And that would have been the end of the game. I'm not even sure what black can do to get out of it. You play queen d5. This is a fork. So queen a5, Magnus is losing, but white goes here. White kind of believes his opponent, believed this rook e8 idea. Now the bishop escapes, and now we just go for an endgame. And I think kind of like part of this, there was a repetition, and then this. But this is of course just a dead draw. 3 pawns on each side. Then the A and B pawns are obsolete because you can just give up one of them to win the other. And at this level, this game is a draw. At amateur level, this game is not a draw. It can still go on, and you know, white could accidentally push too many pawns forward. Black could accidentally walk the king to the center, trade the queens, accidentally win this pawn, accidentally promote. There's a lot of accidents that can happen in this position. But yeah, Zia put on an excellent display against Magnus Carlsen, 2786 at the time, top 2, top 3 in the world, and obviously now one of the greats, one of the greatest of all time. I really love this one final game I'd like to show you. Obviously here the opponent is not quite at the level of Magnus. This was a game played in 2014. I looked at a lot of Zia's games, and now Matthew Wadsworth is like a 23-year-old IM. So back then he was clearly a strong junior player. Now Wadsworth is an international master, so good for him. I wouldn't know too much about that title. In this game, white played an anti-Sicilian, so he played in a Sicilian where the pawn doesn't go to d4. And actually, one thing that Zia did in this position that was super, super cool, it was an idea that was well known back in the day. Sorry, not that well known back in the day. Now everybody knows this idea. This idea is the move g5. And the point is that white has played in a way where, you know, white tried to take your knight, damage your pawns, then white sort of didn't take the knight, and now you actually leave the position. So you play here, here, and now since white wasted time and you've covered that square, you actually back up. And, you know, white's position looks great. If white had unlimited time, he would try to play for d4. So he would go bishop f1, d4, and get the following position. But because white has spent so much time, you actually lash out right away. Now white doesn't have the time to play bishop f1 because you're going to go g4. And if white plays h3, you go h5, and because your rook is still here, yeah, white's in huge trouble. There's even moves like g4. Pawn takes, knight takes, queen h4. You just kind of, not slowly, you literally completely obliterate your opponent. So you got to be really, really careful here. Now, in the game, Matthew did play h3. He was 2188. He's weaker than his opponent, than Zia, and also probably a bit terrified. I've had this position, and after g5, I have played a handful of things. Generally, I like to play g3, so then my knight can go here, and then go to g2, actually, so it kind of hides. Or I just leave it there to be taken. I'm not even exaggerating. Like, sometimes people, you know, do this, but then actually I also get some counterplay ideas. So it's a pretty fascinating position. But h3, h5, and here Zia plays the professional move, which is just putting, you know, eyes there. I would just be bulldozing straight down the board. I got to open up the position as fast as possible. But he plays bishop d6, white blocks. And now that you've made your opponent make these committal pawn moves in front of their king, you have hooks, you have targets, right, on your opponent's side of the board. So he goes queen c7, knight b5, not possible because of that move. a6, bishop g3, by the way, absolutely a threat. I mean, absolutely. You got to do it at the right moment. Like here, the engine is not fully convinced because, you know, you don't have to open up the position. It probably finds a way to defend here. But that is absolutely one of the ideas. And if that's not one of the ideas, h4 is just fatal because of this, you know, brutality over here. And that's actually kind of what happens. The knight steps out of the way. Now, again, g4 and h4 are there. He plays 97 against Zia with a very positional, very solid style, rooted in very good fundamentals. Bishop back to e2. At some point, you got to do something with these pawns, right? You've set up your entire position, so he does. Now white goes here, and he's completely secured the f4 square. So now knight to g6. 4 different pieces are going there. White plays d3. Now, no rush. f6, just stabilizing this position. Bishop to f3. b6, making simple incremental improvements because white has absolutely no pawn play. The position is completely dominated by black. Knight to e2, bishop b7. Now, at some point, white is probably going to start fighting back because it's only a matter of time. Knight e5, knight e3, and this is crazy. I mean, he castles long because it's very obvious that, you know, an attack is going to happen over here at some point. And here, he plays the move f5. And this is just absolute insanity waiting to happen. This is vintage opposite side castling. Both guys ready to just, you know, fight and defeat the other. And this was really fascinating. So white takes. Now his idea is that now that you've moved, I don't actually have to take back. I can hop in. Why? Because g4 is on the way. Not just g4. If we trade, your pawn used to be there. I made it move. So now the G file is open season on the bishop. So f5 was a very smart move. And the thing is, if white had not done anything, then I would have just taken. I would have opened up the h3, h2, you know, I would have won the game. So knight f4, take. And the move that is probably the most impressive of this entire game is coming up. Pawn takes f5, knight takes e5. It would have been better here to play pawn takes and try to hold this position, but this is extremely unpleasant. White has to find a rook sacrifice to survive. Speaking of rook sacrifices, knight takes, bishop takes, d4, and here, again, it is open season, rook to g8. Absolutely hanging the bishop, just giving it up. Why? Because 4 of white's 5 pieces, not including the king, are on their first rank. 3 of them are on the home square. Right, so the king goes to h1. The pawn takes on e4, so f3 is coming. Maybe not right now because of the pin, but it's an idea. Bishop f3. And the move here that Zia played, I mean, a man after my own heart. It's actually one of the only winning moves. It's rook to g3. Sacrificing the rook. Threatening the pawn, threatening the bishop in some variations. And if you take, oh, obviously we just take like this and no. What? Because actually just bishop g2 and f3 and you're too slow. You're too slow. You don't actually have enough pieces. Like this looks good, you lose the game. So what on earth is the idea of rook to g3? The idea of rook to g3, my friends, is to then sacrifice the queen. Because if you take the queen, f2 is discovered check. You can block, doesn't help. You can go here and get mated by a pawn. Have you ever seen something like that? That is nuts. The bishop covers 2 squares, the pawns cover the other 2. I mean, rook g3, fg, and pawn takes on f3, utilizing the presence of the pawn there to get to the king, utilizing the bishop diagonal. The game is over. The only way not to lose right away is to maybe play bishop takes f4, so you bring another rook in, but white goes here. It doesn't matter. f2 check. And now your king has to come forward. H takes g3. Queen goes to f5. Nobody can stop this. You say, yes, you can. Queen to g4. Yep. But now I go to the other diagonal. That's checkmate. You make a run for it. Rook e8 check. Anywhere the king moves, it's made in a few moves. Again, you could have survived maybe by going here. Then I would have gone check. Would have gone check. At the very least, I would have won your queen. I would have promoted to 2 more queens. Then I would have checkmated you with 3 queens. What a game. I mean, what a well-brought attack. I mean, rook g3. Pawn takes f3, sacrificing everything. And then this brutal queen and bishop tandem, rook e8 check. And, you know, obviously, it's not like Ziaur Rahman defeated Magnus in this fashion. He defeated a junior player who at the time might have straight up been like 13 years old. But obviously, he was 2200, and this was an incredible game. And I wanted to make this video because obviously, you know, he passed away way too young. And I can only hope for the best for his son. Actually, I was looking at his son's chess. He's like 2300 FIDE, and I actually lost to him. In fact, not only did I lose to his son, I think I might have even covered it in a video, but I'm not even sure. It was a Title Tuesday game, so I'm 0-1 against his son, and hopefully we have an opportunity to play more games in the future. But yes, obviously very, very tragic, and as I said earlier in the video, I haven't had a lot of opportunities to cover and sort of honor grandmasters that have passed away over the last several years. There was Yuri Averbach, who was the oldest living grandmaster. I think he lived to be 100 years old, if not the 99. And obviously, in the case of Ziaur Rahman, it's a tragedy. It really is. So may he rest in peace. And you know, I send anything I can and condolences, obviously, to his family. I mean, I know he left behind a lot of legacy and a lot of very good chess wisdom over the years. So hopefully we see more strong grandmasters from Bangladesh, and obviously so many strong Indian juniors were influenced by him. So obviously not one of the more upbeat and jovial videos here on the GothamChess YouTube channel, but hopefully you enjoyed anyway. Do let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. It doesn't even feel appropriate to say get out of here. So if you're watching this on the Sunday that it comes out, I hope you had a good weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.